right, so
That is fancy. It's on the side.
yeah, so you guys can see every single. Where's the one? Oh, they can hear you right now. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, the thing that people will say on the recording, and I'm just like, you do know I'm recording, right? They're like, oh. Yeah, covering your mouth and whispering, you know. Anyways, all right. So as you'll notice on this list of words right over here, we've got a total of 38 words. How many multiple choice are there going to be on the test?
30.
All right, so this is pretty much you're going to see almost all these today. So the first thing I would do is, after getting to study all these words, is start to make sense of the similarities between some words. For instance, Ptolemaeus, Vasco da Gama, Prince Henry, what do they all have in common?
They all made voyages.
Yeah, they were all explorers, right up. And each of them contributed more or less to the same idea to get to India. Prince Henry starts the idea, and his main contribution are the outposts. For Ptolemaeus, he makes it around the Cape, but not really past that. But he shows that you can go around Africa. He just had to turn back to this weather. Vasco da Gama is the first guy to actually make it all the way to India and show a viable trade route that goes around the Muslims. So they're all kind of contributing more or less to the same thing, and that, I think, really helps whenever we're trying to memorize this stuff. Now, Treaty of Tordesillas and the East India Company, they're kind of out there on their own, but they're still kind of important to know. So the Treaty of Tordesillas, what was it, first of all? Let's identify it. Yeah.
That crosses the North Americas and South Americas because it was Spain and
Right.
and it was a boat that created it, so they went to fight over.
Okay. So we're kind of combining two elements. The first identification, it was a line divided by the Pope, dividing South America between France and Spain. That's the identifying portion.
That divided what?
It divides South America between France and Portugal and Spain. Excuse me. Now, guys, the other side to that, the reason that it matters, is there was a war breaking out between Portugal and Spain. So this was the Pope's attempt to avoid war and start setting a precedent for how we're going to divide these newly conquered lands. So again, it fits into this whole theme of exploration into conquest, but it's kind of on its own. East India companies, what were they? What was an East India company?
They were powerless taxes.
That's not what they are. Identify. Let's not talk about all the things they can do. What are they? Yes.
They had the power. Wait, oh, you don't want to say the power. Never mind.
Now, that's what I think we need to understand is the difference between what is important about them and simply what they are. Yes. Sorry. Because they did separate trading, yeah. And if you look at their name, it kind of explains it. The East Indies, yeah. They were a company set up by the government to manage trade in the East Indies. How do they do that? This is where the significance comes in. What could they do? They could raise taxes, raise armies, all this different type of stuff. So they were basically almost like governments unto themselves. They would fight wars between each other for control of the East India trade. That's the significance. To see where the difference is as opposed to what something is versus why it matters. Okay, let's keep going through this. All right, so that sort of is our first section right there. Those words. Moving on, Ming Dynasty, Hongwu, Yongle, Zheng Manchus, Qing Dynasty, and Kangxi. First of all, we can kind of take these two and put them together. First of all, what is a dynasty? What does that word mean? Dynasty. Yeah.
It's like
Dynasty.
a ruling of just like one thing.
Yeah, it's a ruling family, right. Okay. So we are talking about two different ruling families. So what's significant about the Ming? What do they do? Yeah.
Dynasty that ended the war.
Yes, they ended the Yuan dynasty, sure.
And they were powerful. lasted for about 30 years.
Sure, and because they're getting rid of the Mongols, what else are they doing? What are they doing with the culture and everything like that? They're changing it to traditional Chinese culture, Confucius and things like that. So we're kind of like, it's an anti-Mongol period. What about the Qing dynasty? What do they do? Who set him up? Who established the Qing dynasty, first of all? The Manchu, all right. So this is the Qing dynasty. What did they do in terms of the dynasty? Yeah, they did. They pushed the borders really to one of its highest points. They expanded to Korea. They expanded it into areas of Vietnam. So the Qing dynasty can be important for that. So we've just kind of identified two ideas, and plus gone to the Manchu. Who were the Manchu, by the way? Yes. They're barbarians from the north, sure. Very similar to the Mongols. Different, but similar. And they're going to be important. Why? Yeah. Yeah. The most other thing is they're establishing the Qing dynasty and collapsing the Ming. So we have these individuals who are tied to these different things. We have Hong Lu, Yang Lu, and Zheng He. Let's start with Hong Lu. What did he do? Yeah.
He created the army that drove out the Mongols.
Yeah, he rose an army, rose a popular rebellion against the Mongols, and thus established the Ming Dynasty. Yes? So that's who he was and what he did. Who were the Mongols? That was the group led by Genghis Khan, or Chinggis Khan, and his descendants. It was a nomadic peoples in Central Asia. Very similar to the Huns, very similar, as we said, to the Ottoman Turks. All these different folks. They're kind of similar peoples. Yang Lo. About him. Who was he? He was the son of. And what did he do that was different? What did he do that was interesting about his father? How did he reform things? Yes.
He moved the capital to Beijing. He kept a lot of his father's policies, but he also was an eager extreme.
Yeah, so he did all these different types of things. Again, the significance versus who he was. He's the son of Hong Wu, who was the next emperor in line, but these are the things that decidedly he does that are different. Being emperor is not really their significance. Their significance is what do they do? It may very well be they did nothing. You know, sometimes we have these situations. We won't probably talk about that too much because we have so much other stuff to do. But you'll find sometimes in history, if you're studying people, like, what do they do? Well, nothing. Okay, moving on. You know, which is interesting too because if you think about it, what would be the better time to live under? A time of war where you're expanding the empire, or where nothing happens? Where nothing happens. That's why maybe live in interesting times is a curse. Anyways, Zheng He, what did he do? Or who was he? First of all, who was he? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, he was a sailor. He was, as we said, Chinese Muslim. And what did he do that was significant? Yes, ma'am.
He led all 7 voyages to spread Chinese wealth.
Yeah. Also to show its influence, get tributary states. It was a political thing as well as an achievement sort of thing. Going and exploring and kind of showing the superiority of the Chinese culture. Yeah. Yeah, Yang Lo was actually the emperor who kind of supports Zheng He. He's the emperor. This guy actually goes. He's the guy that says, yeah, you can go. What about Kangxi? Yes, ma'am.
He was a ruler, but is that right? Yes. So he raised tax. He reduced the taxes, reduced the cost of government, and expanded the empire.
Okay. So he did all those things. Emperor of where? Yeah. Okay, so he's emperor of the Qing dynasty who did all these things. There is a distinction there. We have to note that we got to say he's king because then the first thing that's king of where. See, that's kind of an important missing detail. So go ahead and make certain you put stuff like that. But otherwise, yeah, that's about right. So that fits us up with China. And look, guys, we've already made it through, let's see, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 turns. My, how time flies. What about daimyo? What is a daimyo? Yes.
Warriors.
Okay, the warriors, yeah. But specifically, the term daimyo means what? Yeah. Oh, yes, it does. You're right. Sorry. I was on a different term. Ah. Yes. And what do they do? What was their jobs, so to speak?
What was
Great name is what it means. Yeah. What do they do?
built fortified castles, maintained colonies.
Yeah, they created armies, they built castles, they protected a region, essentially. These are the guys who were raising armies, much like feudal lords did in Europe. Who was Oda Nobunaga? Yes, sir.
Daimyo,
He was the leader of a daimyo. What else? He seized the capital of Kyoto. What else did he do? Yeah. Yes, he did. Because he was betrayed. He was also the first to do what?
Used firearms.
Yep. Yep. So all those things are kind of important things that he did. Toyotomi Hideyoshi. What about him? Yeah.
is what?
He was the best general of Nobunaga. Yes.
You can tell me those
Of China?
or of something.
Where was this going on, guys?
Okay.
Yes, it's Japan.
You can tell me
He was in charge of Japan. The reason I point that out a whole bunch of times, I had about 10 essays on the last quiz where folks put he controlled China.
Was it one of them that's said?
One of them tried to invade China. Did it work? No. So, not so much. But Hideyoshi did do what? Yeah. And is able to basically go about starting to establish the footholds for the Tokugawa shogunate. Yes. Speaking of, what is the Tokugawa shogunate? Yeah.
One of
Mm-hmm. That was Tokugawa. Basically, this is a dynasty that is run by the Tokugawas. And the thing is, they can't be the emperor because that's part of the faith, that you can't go there. So the shogunate is sort of the emperor without being the emperor. They actually run things, whereas the emperor is just sort of a figure, just Killmonger. So the Tokugawa shogunate is going to be this government that's going to run Japan for some, let's see, I think it's around 300 years, 400 years, something like that. So, again, what they are, why they're doing it. Make sense? All right, so we've got 3 more sections to cover. Colony. This is interesting. First of all, what is a colony? Yes, ma'am. Macro?
land control combination.
Sure. Why do we do this? Why do we set up colonies? What's the significance behind it? Yeah.
To get raw material and materials from them, and just to have more land and to spread out your people.
Yeah, it's going to vary depending culture to culture, but the big thing we always come back down to is sending back raw materials to the mother country. Okay, that's always, always, always what we're going to be doing. And those raw materials are going to change. Might be gold, might be coffee, might be sugar, could be a number of different kinds of things. But it's all basically the same idea. So what did Hernando Cortez and Francisco Pizarro have in common? What were they? Again, we can make connections here. Yes, they were conquistadors, which are conquerors. Hernando Cortez conquered which civilization? Yeah. Yeah, modern Mexico is the Aztec. And then Francisco Pizarro conquered where? Yeah. Yeah, the Inca, which is modern Peru, as well as some other places. But, as a part of Colombia. So, the conquistadors, what were they trying to do? We already tell what they are. They're conquerors, but why? What are they trying to do? Yes.
They were trying to find gold and then spread their religion.
Exactly. Have you guys ever noticed whenever you look at like Columbus's ships and the ships that always followed the Spanish, what did they have on the sails? A red cross. Part of the crusade. Atahualpa, who was he? That was somebody else. Somebody else who hasn't answered one yet. Let's go that. You already answered one. Yeah, you answered like 3. Yes. Somebody who hasn't answered one yet. Who was Atahualpa? He answered one, yeah. I was making those folks who haven't said anything yet earn their pay, so to speak. And one thing I would also encourage, if I'm going through all these terms, you're like, I don't remember any of this, we might want to do some more studying. Do a little bit more looking at stuff. That's good. That's how we want it to be. Have you answered one yet? Yeah.
I think it's like one.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah. Have you answered one? Yeah.
You're on the story. A little bit forward.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, she was. He was the Emperor of the Inca. And yes, this counts for that. So he was the Emperor of the Inca. All right, what happened to him? Anybody? Yeah.
He was captured by Pizarro and was held at ransom for like a room filled with gold, and then Pizarro just killed him.
Anyways, yeah. So not exactly the nicest fella. So then the conquest begins, and we have a class structure emerge. Who are mestizos? Yeah.
Like, slash.
All right, so they have to have. Why did that happen? What's the big deal about that? Yeah.
Most like people who came originally for
Yep. And so they would intermarry, and this created different races of both mestizos and mulattoes, and created a social hierarchy based on race. Encomiendas. What was it? Encomiendas. Yes.
a system where the Spanish and Native Americans.
Yeah, they're forced to work. What was the end result? Because these natives were forced to work. What happened to them? Yeah. Well, yeah, they were slaves, but what happened? Yeah, a lot of them died, flat out. Died of disease, overwork, all these things. To such a degree that some were depopulated. We're talking so many people died that they just disappeared. So then there's another side effect of this. What's that? Because we have so many people dying, we've got to have the labor, so where are we going to get it? So this begins the Atlantic slave trade. Yes? So we can kind of tie this to this. You see? Okay. Cool. So again, we've got some things we can do to match together. New Netherlands and New France. Both of these are settlements of European powers. Okay? Difference being, New France is mostly where? Yeah, modern Canada. Whereas the Netherlands is basically where? New York. New York. They called it the Netherlands when it was taken over by the English, which they did because it was splitting the English land in what we consider the United States and then what we consider Canada. The Netherlands was right in the smack middle of it, so they fought a war to control it. When they took it, they renamed it to New York. There you go. I know, right? Jamestown. What was significant about Jamestown? First of all, what was Jamestown? It was a, yeah,
Like a settlement, like New England settlement.
it was an English settlement. What was distinct and interesting about it? Yeah.
It was the first settlement,
Uh-huh.
and a lot of people were there to look for gold, but they realized they didn't have gold, and so they almost like, a lot of people almost like, the town nearly failed until they found it back.
Absolutely. So this is the types of things that we're going to have. Pilgrims and Puritans, what do they have in common? They are both religious groups, yes, absolutely. They were going to flee England for the purpose of escaping religious persecution and establish different colonies in the New World. Yes? About New Netherlands? Well, basically, they're going to end up being these colonies seeking out the fur trade and are eventually going to fight a war with England and lose. That's the long and short of it. So I guess you could say, is that really significant? For them, I guess not so well, because it doesn't quite work out for them. But at the same time, that's why it's there. French and Indian War. Isn't what?
I know what it is, but
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Uh-huh. And who wins that war? England. Because they kick out the French. They gain all this territory. End result also, lots of debt. Who ends up having to pay that debt? The American colonists, which creates the Revolutionary War. I know, right? I mean, it's all like, this happens, this happens, this happens. Who's Metacom? Metacom. Yes, ma'am. All right, he was a Native American leader. What did he do? Yeah. Yeah, we talked briefly about the theme of it, not so much him as an individual. Remember we were talking about how the border skirmishes, the fighting between the natives and like the British, turned really bloody, really gruesome, really fast? Because there'd be like killing of family members and things like that. Because they were a family, the tribe families, and they were trying to get people to move. So how do you do that? Well, again, it's all about taking away the enemy's will to fight. If you murder their families, the hope is that they're going to leave. Did it work? No. What it makes is them want to get revenge, and they do the same thing in the natives. This creates this whole horrible back and forth that we see in the frontier. All right. Only a few more words to go, folks. All right. This is brisk. This is brisk. All right, so we have, what's that? Sorry. The Atlantic slave trade, triangle trade, and Middle Passage all are tied together. Yes?
yes.
All right. So, triangle trade and Middle Passage. Middle Passage is part of the triangle trade, yes? Triangle trade is part of the Atlantic slave trade, yes? The Atlantic slave trade is the thing we're talking about where we've got the exchange of the raw materials across the Atlantic that's going to be made to manufacture goods that are going to be sent to Africa, that are going to be traded for slaves, to the New World, which are going to get more material, and we send this whole triangle. So they call it the triangle trade. So the odds of me asking all of these as separate multiple choice questions are pretty small because they're all tied together. In fact, they all fit in the Columbian Exchange as well. But I would know the distinct difference of, the Middle Passage is part of the triangle trade, is the middle part of it. The triangle trade is part of the Atlantic slave trade because it involves this other aspect of it. In fact, you could actually reverse that to the Atlantic slave trade as part of the triangle trade because, it's potato potato, really. Columbian Exchange, yeah, oh, sorry.
So the triangle trade is all around, but the Atlantic slave just like individual.
Pretty much. Although, again, you can make the argument it's tied together because Why are we getting the slaves? Well, because it's fighting these wars that are being fueled by Europeans. So it's all tied together. It's all short of it. Like most things, economic and truth. Columbian exchange, though. Yes, ma'am. Okay. So what would be an example of a plant that we're going to transport? Yeah. Sure. Potatoes. What about an animal? Horses. And then what about people? There's that. Of course, if you want to be a little bit less that direction, you could also say Europeans, things like that. All of it combines together. Anyways, so the effect of that, of course, being the significance of that is we're going to have new things that are going to change life in all kinds of different ways. For instance, potatoes increase the population of Europe, make people healthier, awesome stuff. The language of Spanish becomes dominant throughout what we call Latin America. The cultural blending of all these different groups that we see in the Caribbean, all that is elements of the Columbian exchange. It's not so simply as just saying, we're trading stuff. It's this merging of different things, the theme of the movement, Right. So that leaves us with these 4 items. Capitalism, joint stock company, mercantilism, all tied together. Balance of trade separate. So let's start there. We didn't actually cover this yesterday because I forgot about it. So I'll tell you what it is. First of all, it has to deal with a nation's trading. Okay. First of all, you guys know the difference between an export and import, yes? Yes. An export is something that you are shipping out or selling. You can think of it that way. Import is something that you are buying, bringing in. A balance means that you are doing an equal amount of exporting and importing. Okay. Now, if you have a trade deficit, that means that you are bringing in more than you're selling, and then a trade surplus is the opposite of that. Why this would matter? To a mercantilist who sees the world economically as being one of competition, if we are buying more than we're selling, we are losing. Because what did they think was the most important thing? How did you measure a country's power? How much money, gold and silver it had. So a balance of trade was paramount for us to be kind of in the game. Ideally, we'd have a trade surplus, meaning that we're selling more. We're taking money from our rivals because there's only a finite amount out there. Does that kind of make sense? The whole thing works to our advantage is the mindset. Now, obviously, that's not true. We've discussed how that's not true, but this is the mindset. Capitalism is what? Yes. Investing will create wealth. Yes. Essentially, you're going to take money, use it to make you more money, either through investing in businesses and stocks or that sort of thing. A joint stock company takes advantage of the system by being supported by what? Investors. Yes. So instead of making a business all by yourself, you get a bunch of people together and make a business. Now, what advantages does that give us as an investor, as a business owner, that say putting all the money off ourselves doesn't give us? Like, what's the advantage of it? What does that allow us to do? No, with the joint stock company, sorry.
Oh, if we lose, we don't lose that much.
Yes, it helps us to mitigate the risk of going out of business. Does that make sense? What's another advantage it would give us? It allows people who normally couldn't be part of business to be able to do so. All of you all can go buy stock right now if you want to, yes? Not many teenagers are really invested in trading stocks and things like that, but you could. There's nothing stopping you from doing so. That's all about capitalism. Joint stock company bringing the opportunities of business to everyone. Doesn't actually work that way, but it's the idea. Okay. Any questions so far on this? Because then the next stage I was going to go through is, how would I ask a multiple question on this? Yeah, go ahead.
So what would you identify the balance of trade?
Balance of trade is where you want to have an equal amount of exports and imports. The significance of that to mercantilism is that they see it as a competition. This gives you an advantage, or at very least mitigates the losses you might have to another form of power. Does that kind of make sense? Other questions? Are we good and want to hear some multiple choice stuff? Because here's what I'm going to be doing as I look at these for multiple choice questions. First of all, I'm going to look at something in the effect of, with these guys, both Pilgrims and Puritans are examples of what? Now I might have A is a religious group, B is political, what have you, is going to have different answers, yeah. Because again, I'm going to look at identification versus explanations. The reasons that they're significant. I might have something like, who was the first Japanese general to use guns successfully? I'm going to have all these guys on here, and if odds are good, I'm also going to take 2 of these guys to see if you guys know the difference. See what I'm saying? I'm going to look for things that stick out. I'm not going to ask definitions because I can't do that with multiple choice. I mean, I can, but it's going to basically be a whole bunch of questions of definition blank match the word. And I don't like those types of questions. I might have 1 or 2, but for the most part, I'm more interested in things like, the Treaty of Tordesillas divided South America between what powers? And I have the Spanish and the English, the French and the Spanish, the Portuguese and the English, the Portuguese and the Spanish. Pick the right answer, This is how I'm going to be looking at these questions. So if you can understand the identifying factors and these significant things, the things that set them apart, you should be able to get 100 of all of the multiple choice questions. Any other questions about this? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
But it's the one under the envelope.
Same here.
What,
I'd probably put your in as well.
where did this go?
They actually went many different places. We had a map of it, and mostly dodge that. Lose my glasses. All right. Basically, he's going to come around this side of Asia into Africa, so kind of all these different areas. But yeah, pretty amazing stuff. Any other questions? All right. I think you guys have some neighborhood of about 5 minutes, 6 minutes till the bell rings. So I'm just going to give you this time to kind of do your own thing. So I'm going to go and stop this and then tell you guys real quick about what we're going to be doing. So 1 second.